I am joined here by Emily Pierce from Persefoni and by Brian Finch from Mastercard. Welcome to the Livestream Hub.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So I am excited for this conversation about climate disclosures because it feels like it's such this incoming and ever-changing environment, and I'd love to demystify it a little bit. So, Emily, I want to start with you. How do you understand the different buckets of regulatory requirements out there?
Well, I think in terms of the buckets related to corporate reporting, it's important to make that distinction because there's a lot of other policy drivers of climate reporting. But right now, we're really looking at four buckets, and I would start with Europe, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that is in force. Many companies around the world are preparing this year to report next year, and even more are going to be preparing this year to gather data next year and report the next year. And that is focused on not just climate risk and climate disclosure, but on broader sustainability disclosure across many environmental, social, and governance topics. And not only your financial material risk and opportunities related to sustainability, but also your impacts on the planet and people. So then we move to the second bucket, and I'm just going to go to the hyperlocal, which is California. You can argue about whether or not that's hyperlocal, but California has moved forward with climate reporting obligations as well. Two half buckets there, one on carbon reporting. That's SB 253, requiring companies over a certain threshold, a million in revenue, to report their Scope 1, Scope 2, and 3 emissions. And then you have SB 261, which requires companies with 500 million in revenue and above to report on their climate financial risk. And that reporting is based on the principles and recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So now we'll zoom out to the national level. We're all waiting at the edge of our seats for the SEC's finalization of its proposed climate disclosure rule. And there I like to remind folks that it's actually the case that public companies in the U.S. have had obligations to disclose their risks related to climate change since the beginning of time for the SEC, really with core disclosures about, telling the market about what your core risks are. But in 2010, the SEC did issue guidance specific to that issue of climate change. So the SEC's proposal was about enhancing and standardizing the way companies made disclosures about climate risk to the market to make that information more consistent and comparable for investors. And so we're waiting to see what that will look like in its final form. The real question is, what are the details going to be? How specific is it going to be? But again, it will emphasize that companies need to focus on good disclosure about these risks in a way that is decision useful for investors. And then we zoom out to the rest of the world. And there, it's really important to focus on the positives, which is that there's been a lot of work in the public space to drive convergence around sustainability disclosures. And as you look at the regulatory regimes rolling out across the globe, I think 2024 will be a big year for that. Most of them are inspired by the International Sustainability Standards Board. And in fact, not just inspired, they're directly looking to those standards and to incorporate them into their regulation. And that's a huge win for companies who operate across borders, for investors who invest across borders, and for businesses who engage with companies across borders, because it sets a common baseline for that core financially material information related to sustainability topics for companies to share. And again, one more detailed standard on climate. So climate is the first focus, but also incorporating a framework for thinking about broader sustainability risks and opportunities, and an agenda moving forward to develop more specific standards on other topics.
Got it. So we have Europe, which is currently enacted. We have California, which I believe that's going to take effect in 2026 is the first year that companies need to start
reporting.
For reporting. Then we have SEC, and we're on the edge of our seat finding out what's going to happen with that. And then the rest of the world.
Yes.
Okay, that's a lot of cross currents. Brian, I know you're a U.S.-based organization, but you operate globally. How are you finding the European environment, making this more complex for you?
Yeah, so Mastercard technology company in the payment space with a global reach, operations in almost 100 countries. A lot of complexity, a lot of uncertainty around this space. There's intense effort right now and energy expense going into readying for these disclosures. Preparing really for the first time, you see industry trying to bring their sustainability disclosures up to the level of financial disclosures. That was a process that in the U.S. evolved over decades, and we're talking just a matter of a few years where that same maturation has to happen here. So there's intense pressure on a lot of companies, including ours, to get ready very quickly. Yeah, that said, like this is a great moment for sustainability transformation inside of companies. And we can be using this moment as a forcing function to drive the change that's really needed. And so I'm I'm very excited for what is a lot of work, a lot of expense ahead because it's doing what it's needed to do at the end of the day. This reporting is going to be driving change.
I love that perspective. That's like, yes, it's a lot of work, but it's the type of thing we actually need in order to make the change we need. So I'm glad you're excited about this. Emily, it also sounds like we have a lot of different threads going on. I could see this being onerous for organizations. They're needing to do these different types of reporting. What opportunities are there to align across these different buckets to make more efficiencies?
So I think the good news is that a lot of that opportunity has already been capitalized on. All four of the regulations and standards that I discussed really inspired by the framework that was built by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So again, across all the regulations, climate disclosure is a common thread, but the underpinnings of climate disclosure and ultimately the other sustainability topics is really those four pillars of governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. So just as Brian was saying, we're really driving companies through regulation to think about their governance first. What processes do you have in place to identify your risks and opportunities? What is your business's strategy to respond to those sustainability risks and opportunities? How are you managing those risks? And then within those topics, what are the metrics and targets that you need to measure to track your performance? And how do you communicate those risks and opportunities and how you're managing those to your investors? Or in the case of Europe and California, other audiences. So that common thread of those four pillars is key. And within that metrics and targets pillar, we talked about climate as being the common topic. Carbon is the common metric. I like to talk about the carbon data as the cornerstone because you need to understand your carbon data to develop your transition plan, to develop your targets, to make the disclosures about your progress towards your targets, to understand what you want to do to adapt and mitigate to climate change. So I think, if a company focuses on those four pillars first, including that core data point of carbon metrics, you then have a strong foundation to build on your other reporting under your CSRD obligations for your impacts and other controls around that reporting. And so that the good news is that's the common thread. I will say that there's room, there is opportunity that can still be pursued to further that convergence. Some of the reporting obligations are not as direct about building specifically on those pillars, or, for example, allowing a company to build that foundation and use that same foundation for different reports. So I think there's still opportunity that we can pursue as a market in the interest of efficiency for both reporters, investors, also assurance providers, more broadly for the market. But again, I think the good news is we're really close to the finish line on that, and there's opportunity for more efficiency, but we're in a good place.
I love this excitement around all these opportunities.
Yeah.
So I want to put a finer point on this. Brian, can you help illuminate what your strategy has been to be navigating these new expectations?
Yeah, so we've all seen this coming. And so Mastercard began this journey preparing about 2 years ago now. And it really is about putting that foundation in place that Emily was alluding to. We made a decision that I think was critical 2 years ago to one, establish an ESG controller inside our company. So this office is a key partner to our sustainability team in helping prepare us and prepare the rest of the company for the level of controls and processes and disclosures that meet the bar that financial reporting has required for some time now. It's also about ensuring that we have that governance and those systems in place that are going to allow us to adjust and evolve in the same way that the reporting landscape is going to continue to evolve. We know what's coming with CSRD. We know what's coming with California, with ISSB to a degree, but we don't know what else is going to be coming, and I'm sure there will be more around the corner. So it's really about having that foundation that will allow you to adjust and pivot and build on. I think that starts with the reporting, with the governance, and it starts with the reporting systems and processes that can be built off of.
Well, Emily Pierce, Brian Finch, thank you so much for joining us and helping to demystify this new regulatory environment.
Thank you.